Oh, that was not one of my finer tractor moments. Welcome back to Tale 3 Cabins. I mentioned in my previous episode, maybe 2 episodes ago, I gave you a little tour of the pole barn and that JD had turned 4 years old back in October of 2022. And now I want to just kind of go over some of the mistakes I've made with JD and some of the things that I broke. Some of the things I broke with the tractor. Maybe they were warranty related, maybe they weren't. Leaks, things that loosened up, some problems I had with implements. And let's just start off with the front here with the loader. One of the things I love about this tractor is how easy it is to remove the bucket and add attachments onto it, whether it's the brush crusher, the plow, just by simply pulling out a pin and using the hydraulics to get it off. You probably have these pins that have the little wire attached to it, and then on the side there is a little place to clip that pin. And if you're lazy sometimes like me, sometimes you pull that pin out, just let it hang. My luck ran out about 6-7 months ago back in the summertime. I took that pin out, it was hanging, it just hit the concrete and the curb just right and sheared off the cable of that pin. I probably am going to have to order a new one eventually. I did a little makeshift job where I took an old piece of chain and I'm temporarily using that and it's working just fine. But I'll eventually just order a new part with the cable and put back the way it was originally. It shouldn't be too hard to change. You might let them hang like I used to do, and now since that's happened, I pretty much put them always back in the little slot and clamp it on. One of the things that gave me an idea for this video is I was coming in here periodically in the fall and I started noticing some sort of puddle underneath the tractor, and I really couldn't determine exactly what it was at first because by the time I had noticed it, it was pretty much dried up. So I didn't know, I was thinking it was hydraulic fluid. I couldn't tell if it was radiator fluid. So one day after I was running the tractor for a while, I started noticing visible drips coming on the pavement where I was working. So then I brought it back into the pole barn here, let it sit for a while and paid attention. And sure enough, I saw a larger puddle. I pinpointed down to where the hoses were leaking, and it was actually in a section that I had to cut and then splice in a hose when I was putting the cab in, and that was a hose for the cab heater. I didn't know if I had a little crack in the hose. It seemed like it was kind of a rough cut when I cut it. It wasn't that easy to cut. I was trying to cut it with a PVC cutter, and it was a little bit rough on the end, so I just didn't know if the clamp was on right. So I loosened up the clamp a little bit, retightened it, and so far it's been okay since. So another thing I noticed having a tractor after a period of time is that the gear shifter for the low and the high started to become really loose. And it's not too hard of a fix. It's kind of hard to get to. You can kind of see if you're looking through the top what you have to tighten down, but the best way to take care of that is you're going to need 2 open-end wrenches. I think I used a ratcheting wrench on one side and then just an open end wrench, and I just tightened down the bolts. So it was a little bit hard to get to. It was in a tight spot. There might be better tools to be able to reach this, but I was able to do it with the 2 wrenches, and now the thing works perfectly. It's almost brand new, and I actually tightened it a little bit more than from what I remember when I got it. So when you definitely snap it in there, it stays in there and it's in there tight. I did notice before when it was starting to loosen up, a lot of times I would be in a gear doing something and all of a sudden it would just pop out of that gear because it got so loose. It was a pretty easy fix, and while we're on the subject of some other things that have loosened up on the tractor, I had another leak that had to do with the hydraulic steering cylinder up front. At the time I didn't notice it, but I was seeing little drips here and there again, and at this time I could definitely tell it was hydraulic fluid. As I'm driving around, I would see a little drip, drip, and it was hard for me to determine where it was coming from. And eventually I noticed it was coming from the supply to the hydraulic cylinder for the steering, and it was just a simple fix too, just an open-end wrench. Another thing that's loosened up on my tractor are the sticks for the controls for the backhoe. After a period of time, especially if you're trying to dig out a stump or something, you're really using those controls a lot. It really puts a lot of wear and tear on those controls. I noticed that those started to become loose too. If you pop the rubber boot that's encasing the base of your control sticks, you lift that up and you'll see that there's 3 adjustment screws for each stick, and they're Allen screws. Reach in there, snug those up, and again, you can actually snug them up too much, so you just want to get the right play. Just another thing that came loose over time and a pretty easy fix. I also want to hear from you guys too. If you've had problems with your tractor, what you broke throughout the years, what's maybe covered under warranty, what hasn't been covered under warranty. Please share it with everybody down below because this information is always helpful. Another thing about those rubber boots on the backhoe is that they always come off once You put them back on, and if you use your backhoe for a little while, they loosen up again and they're just kind of flopping around. That's kind of a little bit of a pet peeve for me. There's nothing you could really do about it. It's just live with it. Put them back on when you're done, and then they're going to pop off the next time you end up using them. So I mentioned the tractor's over 4 years old now as we speak here in the winter time, and the battery has lasted fairly well. I haven't had any issues with it, but I expect that 5-year point is probably when I want to replace the battery. I was hoping I could get it through this year, and I made a little bit of an error right around the holidays. We had some extreme cold, and we got about 4 or 5 inches of snow. Nothing to speak about, nothing to make a video about, but I went out there, I put my headphones on, just wanted to play in the snow, do a little shoveling. We had people coming over for Christmas, and I went across the street and did the neighbor's yard. We had very, very high winds, and the temperature was -7 at the time. And I ended up doing a little trick where you just turn the ignition twice to get the glow plug a little bit hotter before you started. The tractor started right up. I had no issues with it. I had my little cab heater on. Normally it's very toasty with that cab on. I can work in a light shirt, but -7 degrees, I ended up leaving my jacket on, kept my gloves on too, maybe because the tractor was still so cold. It was fine. It was better than being out in the elements at -7. So what happened is I'm out there plowing the little bit of snow that we had. I had my earplugs on. I got all done. We back in. I still have my earplugs on with the music playing. Shut the tractor off. Close everything down in here. Close the door. But what I did not hear with my earplugs on is that the blower motor for the heater motor was still going. So it actually ran the battery down to 0. It was completely dead next time I came in here, and I'm thinking at -7 and running it down to 0, those are two dreadful things for a battery, and I didn't know if it was going to come back and recover. So I did put it on a trickle charger, and the trickle charger stayed red for probably 3.5 days before I got a green light back on it. And so far, the battery's been working okay. Just a word to the wise that you want to be careful with your battery. You don't want to run it down to 0. And after about 4 or 5 years, it's probably about the time when you want to think about replacing it. I'm probably going to see if I can make it through this year and replace this one in the fall. So far, so good. I hope I did not damage that battery, but we'll find out here in the long run. If you watch my channel, you know that I do quite a bit of work with this tractor, and I do put it through the ringer quite a few times. And I've only had one time where I ended up getting a flat tire. It was this back rear tire. I woke up one morning after using the tractor for a while, and the tire was flat. I was able to detect where the leak was at. It was pretty simple to find, not too terrible of an issue. Got up and running again in no time. It did not break the seal or anything like that. That's the only time I've had an issue with the tire so far with getting a flat. Okay, while we're over on this side of the tractor, let's talk about this running board thing here. I was trying to help my neighbor out. I had my tiller on the tractor already because I had just tilled my own garden. We were chit-chatting a little bit, and I said, hey, I got the tiller on. Do you want me to come over and just till up your garden for you? And he thought it was a good idea. I went over there, and I didn't realize that he had like a little edging around his garden where even where you enter through the door, that he had about a 6-foot piece of wood there blocking the entrance. And that was pretty much irremovable the way he set up his garden. So he made a makeshift little ramp. I thought in the back of my mind, it's a little hokey. I thought I was going to break this board that he put up. But once I had crested over the top of that board, the little ramp came forward, jammed right into here into my running board. I also have all my hydraulics running underneath here, hydraulic lines. And you could tell by looking at the video that it did push things a little bit forward. It's put them off kilter a little bit. It's not terrible, but it did do some minor damage to the tractor. There were no leaks. Nothing happened to the hydraulic lines. Everything works fine. It's just mostly cosmetic. I lost some of the plastic here on the bottom of this running board. I like to keep things neat and clean, and I don't necessarily need them pristine, but a blemish like that kind of gets to me a little bit. So I know this is a tractor. It's a work tractor, and it's going to have stuff like this happen. But it still was a little bit of an ouch when it happened to me. And then I was kind of stuck in there. We had to figure a way of getting out. So we ended up having to get his orange tractor over there and assist me to get up and in, did his tilling, came out, changed the ramp system up a little bit better. That's a little war wound. As your tractor gets older, you start getting these little war wounds, and you say, oh, I got that scratch from so-and-so's house, and this is from the neighbors, and on and on and on. Late in the summer, early in the fall, I took JD down to southern Ohio to do some clearing, do some brush hogging, stuff like that. and I was getting some pretty thick stuff, and some of the thickets caught the rubber weather stripping here around this door. Loosened it up. You can even see a couple little prickers still stuck in here, but I brought it home. Thought that I could use some glue. I had some Gorilla like spray-on glue that I sprayed in the slot. Then I took some bungee straps, tried to strap this in so it would be held in there tight, but it just did not do the trick. I'm gonna have to think of something else. I see there is some sort of like weather stripping type of glue you can buy on Amazon. I don't know if anybody's ever had any experience with that, if you've restored cars or replaced a weather stripping on your vehicle that's got that nice rubber strip on the doors or doorways. If you've used something like that or have an idea what to use, please leave a comment down below. I'd appreciate it. So not only do I have problems with the tractor, and these are mostly minor issues compared to some of the stories I hear out there, and I'd just love to hear your stories. But there's also issues with implements too. You spend a lot of money on some of these implements, so you want them to work good and you think they're tough, but it doesn't always work out that way. I have a brush crusher here and I've used it quite a bit. It's basically called the poor man's grapple. And I've got a lot of use out of it. It's worked well. I had it at my daughter's house one day and we were picking up a lot of piney type, rubbery type branches, shrubbery, good sizes, dragging them over to her fire pit and just trying to get rid of some of her yard waste. I crunched down too hard on one of them and I could not get the jaws to open back up. This is on a hinge, so it's not a hydraulic type of jaw. And I think even if it was hydraulics, it still have an issue coming apart because I ended up having to get a pry bar. I ended up getting the chainsaw out. Took the chainsaw and cut out as much as I could. Pry barred the heck out of it to get it open, and that thing was really sandwiched in there. When all said and done, when I went and looked at it, I noticed that I had bent one of the teeth on it, and I haven't bothered to fix it yet because the teeth are still working just fine. So I've left it the way it is, but that's my damage that I've done to my brush crusher. Got a lot of use out of it. Sometimes I'd be curious just how well a grapple would work in comparison, but for the price at the time and for not having to get the third function kit on your tractor, this was a pretty quick and easy way to help me out around my property and other people's property as well. Last winter we had a good bit of snow. I was using the snow plow on the front end and I was cruising down the driveway at a pretty good clip, and then I noticed that the snow plow was off kilter, and then when I brought it up off the ground, I'm looking at it and it's tilted on a bad angle and I'm trying to figure out what happened. So I ended up sharing a pin. Once I got it back inside the pole barn, I brushed all the snow off of it, looked, and I found a pin that was broken. Ended up having to order it. It took about a week and a half, 2 weeks for it to come in. Wasn't too hard to replace at the time. At first when I was looking at the pin, it almost seemed like it was something like a weld broke or something like that. So the fix wasn't too bad. Replacing the pin wasn't too bad. I had to loosen up the springs on the snow plow to get these pins back in properly, put everything together, tighten it back up, and so far we're good to go. I ended up buying an extra pin just in case I encounter this again. Hopefully not. This year has been a bust so far. We haven't really got much snow at all. And then down below here is my tiller. And this is not my first tiller. I got my original one from Tractor Supply. It said County Line on it. When I bought it, I noticed that it was a chain-driven tiller. It was on sale. It was about $17.99 at the time. I used it maybe 2 times. I'm in the midst of the second time of using it. I'm tilling up my garden, and the tines just stopped spinning. I lift it up out of the ground. They start spinning again. I lower it, and they stop. Lift it up, same thing. It turns out, from what I could tell, is that it's a chain-driven tiller, and the chain tensioner inside the gearbox let loose. I called them. They were going to send me the parts to fix it, and I told them, look, I've only used this a couple times. It's only a couple months old. They decided that they were going to replace it, but they had to wait for a model to come in. I ended up taking that back to Tractor Supply, waiting for a new one to come in, and it probably took a good month and a half, which was unfortunate because I wanted to plant my garden. I ended up tilling my garden the old-fashioned way. But a new tiller did come in. It does say County Line on there. A lot of these are the same tiller, like if you get it from Rural King, if you get an RK48, this is basically the same tiller as that. Even when I got the manual of this, it said Tartar on the side, which Tartar makes a bunch of implements for tractors, and I think that they just put different names on them and distribute them to different vendors like Tractor Supply or Rural King. So this one still says County Line on it. I was happy when I went to go pick it up and I look on the side and it says gear driven on the side. And I noticed that they did not make that first model anymore that I got, so I wonder if there were some sort of issues with the chain drive on that tiller. This one has worked great ever since. I put it through the ringer quite a few times and have no issues. So that's just a few of the things that have gone wrong with me and my tractor in the last 4.5 years old. Nothing earth-shattering, nothing too terrible, nothing where I had to demand some sort of warranty work on it or anything like that. No issues with the engine, no issues with the wheels falling off. If you've had issues with your tractor, I'd love to hear about it down below, just what you've gone through, simple little repairs, whatever it is. I've just hit the 300-hour mark, so this is going to be a good time being in the middle of winter where there's not a lot of projects that I can be doing right now of changing out the oil and all the filters and everything, fuel filters. So I'll be taking care of that soon. I appreciate everybody watching. Hope you enjoy and subscribe to these videos. Click on that little bell when you want to know when a new one's coming out. And keep an eye on us. Take care, everybody.